As far as the impact we have on the ecology, on the ecosystem, yes, that's significant. We are an extractive industry. We are a big mining company. We do about 35 million tons of mining today. We are one of the largest miners in the country. We are one of the largest steel companies in the world. Steel is a hard to abate sector, accounts for a big part of the carbon footprint of the world.
Everyone agrees.
But having said that, this group was set on an ethos of not looking at the community as just another stakeholder, but the very purpose of our existence. You know, these were the words of J.N. Tata. Yeah. And that's an ethos which really makes the community, far more important than most corporates consider them to be. So it's not just about having a social license to operate, but about doing what is right for the community and the ecosystem. And I think Tata Steel has tried to do that over the years, and we continue to do that. You want to build solar panels, the structures which hold solar panels are made of steel. You want to build windmills, there's a lot of steel in it. You want to make hydrogen, the plants that make hydrogen will have a lot of steel, right? You have to transport gas and hydrogen, everything else, you will need to use steel. So to me, steel will always be there. Steel will always continue to be used, but steel has a major ecological footprint, like you said. It's 7% of the carbon emissions in the world. It's traditionally been extractive because 75% of the steel is made through the blast furnace route, which means you use iron ore and coal. Yeah. Okay, so steel needs to think circularity a lot more. Okay, so we need to recycle much more. So which means the share of scrap in the making of steel has to increase, which will increase, but is limited by how much of steel you've consumed in the past, because the scrap comes out of the steel that you've consumed in the past. But it can certainly be higher than the 25% share that it is today. Today, it is only 25%, partly because it is cheaper to produce steel using iron ore and coal than by melting scrap. Okay, so that economics will change as there's carbon pricing in some markets like in Europe. And also corporates like us take a deliberate call to get more and more into recycling because it's the right thing to do. Secondly, if you use the concept of circularity, you will also look at how can I design for longevity? How can I design for repair? How can I design for reuse before I start recycling, right? So steel industry needs to think on that.
Thank you very much, Mr. T.V. Narendran, the Managing Director of Tata Steel, and Mr. Ranjit Barthakur, the founder of Balipara Foundation, for their valuable message. And now we'll move on to our next panel discussion, which is, the theme is Ecology is Economy. Let me have a few words about this theme before we invite our esteemed dignitaries. The next 10 years are imperative to place ecology front and center on global and national agendas to combat growing threats to the world's food, water, and survival systems and its rural communities. Building on the campaign to recognize ecology in the economy, initiated in 2020, the 10th Eastern Himalayan Naturenomics Forum seeks to drive this agenda for transformation in the region. Investing in a transition to ecology in the economy is no longer optional. It is a necessity. So with these few words, I would like to humbly request our dignitaries for today's panel discussion to come on stage and take their seats. First of all, we have Mr. Anis A. Khan, the Vice Chairman, Aspen Capital Solutions, LLC, New York, who is the chair of this session. A round of applause for Mr. Anis A. Khan. We also have Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary, the Vice President Corporate Services, Tata Steel India. A round of applause for Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary, sir. Thank you, sir. We have Dr. Richard Geo, Asia Pacific Region Conservation International, Singapore. A round of applause for Dr. Richard Gio. We're delighted to have Professor Mizan R. Khan, the Deputy Director, ICAD, Bangladesh. Sir. Now, I would like to request our dignitaries to take their seats and also request Mr. Anamis A. Khan to start this session for all of us. Thank you, sir. All right. First of all, I would like to request the tech guys to have a look at Anis sir's presentation slides. Can you open them up?
Assalamu alaikum and good morning, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. Before I proceed further, as is my duty and passion, to recognize the valiant freedom fighters who laid down their lives for the liberation of this nation, because this is December 12th, 16th, we celebrate our Liberation Day, from liberation from colonial yoke. And we were teenagers, so we knew what happened and looked and saw. I also wish to recall the contributions made by the freedom fighters who are still living and did so much for this nation. And 50 years later, we are now sitting in this beautiful university campus in this great hall. And also I'm fortunate to be part of this system here as an adjunct faculty teaching banking and finance. I had assembled a presentation, very small, short presentation, very basic presentation, which should not take more than 5 minutes, which should set the tone. But unfortunately, I had sent it last night. If you don't have it, I have a pen drive in my little bag I've got here. And I can, you got it? You didn't get it. I mailed it last night. I would also like to thank Balipara Foundation for inviting me over here. It's a great honor. And also Ambassador Tariq Karim, who's the chair of the Bay of Bengal Studies, for this great event, the collaboration between Bangladesh and India. We have already heard very eminent speakers, both through video hookup and also over here, most eminent academicians of the world, also senior civil servants from India who are legendary and whom we have seen over the years also come to Bangladesh, serve in Bangladesh. Thank you, sirs, for coming to our country in this beautiful December month when the weather is so good. I'm also very happy to see His Excellency, the British High Commissioner, who has become a good friend over the years, with whom also I work on other ventures. We have this, great. So we have this presentation. If you don't mind, I'll have to sit down and do it because I've got a very bad hip. So I can't stand for too long.
They have the presentation, so will they play it?
Yes, please. Okay. Can I control it?
Sure.
Okay. So we all know why we are here. Hello, yeah. So we are talking about ecology, which is also, if you use this, it's very interesting, it's economy. And we are talking about the environment. And I thought there would be some students over here who are always my favorite when I come in here. and I see them all the time. They come and see me for various advice and all that. So I will not go into all that because you're all very senior, learned personalities here. Uh, so we know what these are. So just we'll go through this. Of course, it is also was there in the main slide, opening slide. So predators, catchment area, humans, food, diseases, water, etc. So we know that. So ecological economics is about taking ecology into the economy. This is what we are here for. Sustainable human well-being. And it's got all those ingredients, all those words, ecological economics that are there. Also, how the economy interacts with society and the environment. There are three parts to this circle. And so you get the ecology. And this is more detailed. There comes GDP, production, wealth, labor, trade, and governance, which has become extremely important everywhere, whether it be in banks or whether it be in government or corporations, or even in local union parishads. So again, I will not go into all this because you're all very eminent personalities. So what I liked here was the fundamental focus in the concept of natural capital, which we are talking about, especially about Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, India, this entire region that we have got from the Himalayas down to the Bay of Bengal, which suffered from deforestation, denudation, desertification, flooding, sedimentation. But at the same time, it's a very rich delta, which generates so much in crops, fish, marine resources. So it's a mix. It's rich, but it suffers natural calamities. So again, I'll not go into all that, just to set the tone. So this is very interesting. The environment, human activity, the inputs, then results in waste, and we need to recycle that, which has become very important. And we've seen from this climate conference held at Sharm el-Sheikh recently. So this is very interesting. I found this. I thought I would study more of this for all the theories of neoclassical economics, labor economics, agricultural economics, etc., how they interact. I thought this was a very interesting slide that I got from an open source. I thought this is brilliant. And the ethics focus also, so important. Again, you come back to governance. So again, these are new things that I'm trying to learn. Ontology, I never knew what it was. Time and space-bound national wealth, as per the classical economics, now say wealth universal in time and space. Ontology. Epistemology, economics as a normative contextualization. And now economics is a value-neutral decontextual. So they're completely at an antithesis. And the conclusion is that limited economic expansion by classical economists and neoclassical unlimited economic growth. So I found that very interesting. This is also interesting. Again, I will save my time because we have got 30 minutes. We've got three eminent personalities going to speak. So environmental economics, they price the environment, they define property rights. Ecological economics, environmental investments, and distribution of the wealth from the rich north to the less rich south. Again, this is very interesting. I found this examples of wastage and linear externalities in today's linear cities, how we waste. Even if, can you imagine all those 5-star hotels or 3-star hotels? Every day they serve you breakfast or have buffet lunch or dinner. Then what happens to all that food out there? And what is the need for putting up so much food? Who can eat so much food? I always wonder. I hope they give it to the orphanages. I hope they do something with all that. Why waste? So this is again very interesting. The natural capital and man-made capital, solar energy, matter energy, you recycle, and then you get energy, you get heat. And when winter's coming in the northern hemisphere, you need a lot of heat. And people are worried because how will they get enough gas because of the Ukraine war? Again, that's the same thing, the one I showed you before. And these are books which have been written already on the subject. I found that very interesting. Again, this is the leaking world. I found that also very interesting. And look at some pictures. I'll just end with some pictures. This is terrible. Then we are thinking of solar panels. I was part of making a building in Dhaka city where we put up solar panels and rainwater harvesting. So it made me very happy to have been able to do that. Look at that, so how they are making everything green. You've got something like this in Chile, and then something like this in Singapore also. Your place, Mr. Gio. So that's beautiful, I think. And many Dhaka homes now have rooftop gardens. In my house also, my wife has a small little garden. So this is all beautiful, and this is where we should be heading. Protect the environment, protect the marine resources. And Obama said it's not a choice between our environment and our economy, it's a choice between prosperity and decline. And, of course, the eminent Kofi Annan, contrary to popular belief, we do not face a choice between economy and ecology. It's often said that protecting the environment would constrain or even undermine economic growth. In fact, the opposite is also true, is true. Unless we protect resources and the Earth's natural capital, we shall not be able to sustain economic growth. So the ecological footprint, I like this also. So all this footprint is everywhere. And this is more details, I won't go into it. So environmentally friendly, eco-friendly, for a living planet, bioenergy, thinking green, save the world and the environment, go green. There's no planet B. Thank you. It's very short. So with those words, I will move into our first speaker. Thank you for making this journey here, Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary. You work in the corporate world. So I have worked for 40 years in the corporate world and continue to work over there. It's a challenge. You got so many dimensions to it. You have boards, you have regulators, you have media, you have customers, you have your own teams. So there's a great interaction that you have to balance as a leader. So having said those and the tone that I have set, how in your company do you view this ecology is economy, and what do you do? If you can give us some good examples, I think that will benefit the audience. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and good morning, everyone. Sorry. Uh, I think I'll just continue with what I heard our CEO and Managing Director speak, Mr. TV Narendran, before the session started. And I think your context setting was obviously aligned to the whole thing. As an organization, as Tata Steel, we have actually set out a lot of goals and visions for ourselves, specifically through policy documentations and policy formulations. So we have a biodiversity policy which started somewhere in 2016. But I'll just go into specifics in terms of saying what we as a company are doing to ensure. So just picking up stuff which we heard since yesterday afternoon, things like uh, more with less, uh, recycling, reduction and reuse. So if you look at the steel industry, and it is obviously one of the hard to abate sectors, 7% carbon emissions of the world, uh, we have been actually on this journey of not only should we say reducing consumptions of all the natural resources, because the moment you start reducing, you start producing lesser from the extractive world, so mining iron ore and coal. So there was a time when iron ore you would mine and only use selectively, because whatever could be used directly into the blast furnaces or sinter plants. But now technologies have helped, so you have a lot of technology available for low grade beneficiations of iron ore. Similarly, for coal, whatever comes in India, personally speaking, is not too good in quality, but we beneficiate a lot. So, what it means is that substitution of this coal is going to come from Australia. So, look at the carbon footprint of coal, which gets mined in Australia, then gets transported into India and waterways, inland, and whatever. So I think we've been using this quite a lot. Second, I think what we have also done a lot more and better, I would say, is consumption of water. So steel companies use a lot of water for producing steel. And there used to be a time when it used to be 10 meter cube per ton of crude steel, which is now hovering around 2. We want to go up to 1. And the reason we have used this is that water is a resource which is going to be, it is already scarce. And more of recycling, reuse on the water side. The third angle, and I'll then stop because I know others are going to speak. We've also built in bridges now with the community that we engage, we work with. So there are many such examples of production in the agriculture fields which are actually getting used in alternate material productions or even steel production. So, for example, bamboo plantation for biomass. For example, in Jharkhand and Orissa in India, we have a flower called kusum, which gives you lac, and that lac gets used for alternate material called graphene. Now, what happens in this is that you are connecting the grassroots production to the facility, which will actually get used for alternate materials. May not be helping steel, but will give alternate material. So it's a chain which works. You do not actually exploit the environment anymore on these things. So I'll just stop here, because I think what we are doing more and more is to reduce consumptions of resources currently. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary, for giving the viewpoint from your corporate point of view. And I'm very happy to hear that in 2016, you came up with a policy and documentation. So that shows that your company continues to be at the forefront of innovation, of adapting to change in the world. So that is why Tata is Tata. We'll come back to you. Just wanted to add that I'm a banker, as most people know. Basically, I'm a banker. And as part of my banking experience, in 2009, Dr. Atiur Rahman became the governor of Bangladesh Bank, and then he started the journey of financial inclusion, which included women empowerment, products for women. Then he came up with solar energy, projects. And then he also said that I'll give you help with many, many green energy products, which you have to design. So he was very inspirational in that way. So I now remember in August 2010, I journeyed with him early morning. I started, there was no Padda bridge there, so we had to cross the mighty river, Padda River, and then go down south to Borguna, which is down there, and on the bay, to inaugurate the first ever solar powered irrigation pump in South Asia. It made me very proud. It was made in Bangladesh by Rahim Afroz Bangladesh Limited. And I felt so happy when Dr. Atiur Rahman pressed the switch and the machine came to life. It meant that instead of 2 crops a year, the farmers would get 3 crops. And they did this through a cooperative. And it costs 4.5 million takas. And all they have to pay is pay a certain amount of money to the cooperative for whatever water they used. So, and then it went on. Now we have hundreds of these pumps across the country. So this is one example I would like to give you and share with you, a live example of which I have been a humble part. I shall now move on to our next speaker, Mr. Richard Geo. Thank you for making the journey from Singapore. And you are Asia Pacific Regions Conservation International. So you have a different view of this. You work with this all the time. And you know much more about it than I know, at least. So your viewpoint on what we have set the tone on. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. It's really an honor and very humbling to be part of this panel. So first, I'd just like to say, I wish, Mr. Khan, you had given many PowerPoints I've seen over the years, because I like the speed, the sort of the fast cutting of going through it very quickly, because it does prime us for what we're talking about. We don't need to have these big lectures, but we do need to sort of think about these things in the same way. So I do appreciate that. And I'd also really like to just thank the organizers here, especially Balipara Foundation. You've made myself and our team at Conservation National just feel so welcomed. This is wonderfully organized gathering of like-minded individuals. I've already learned a few things here just in a few days of conversations and being in this in this convening. And the first thing is that Balipara and this group are really on the forefront of something very important, and that's this idea of linking protection. It's like, at Conservation International, environmental NGOs, we've talked about protecting nature for many years. And in fact, I've spent my entire adult life working on trying to protect special places that I personally love, special places that science say are important for biodiversity, for ecosystem services. But it's always been sort of a kind of a side thing for the world, because the world economy is going, development is happening. And the protecting nature has been, until recently, really almost on the fringe of that. But now it's very central. There's this idea that it's commonly understood that nature is the foundation of our economy and our planet. But somehow that's not quite linked yet to the production systems that drive economics. This idea of linking protection and production systematically. Professor Dasgupta put this very eloquently, in terms of economics. This idea of provisioning goods are dependent on the natural capital that nature is providing. In his review and his body of work from his career, he's very, very eloquently demonstrated this. But this is not happening in the world. But one of the things I've learned is the Balipara Foundation, through their concept of rewilding, is making this link. Is not just saying we're going to rewild these places, but we'll rewild these places in a way that the goods and the economic growth for communities are coming back to protecting. So it closes this loop. These have been open loop systems, that nature gets degraded for economic development. But instead of that, it creates this virtuous cycle, where communities benefit, where they create livelihoods and jobs, but some of that economic growth, some of that value is created locally and comes back and builds wealth, it builds livelihoods, it builds economies. And these are not just one-off projects, these are scalable projects. And this is something that we at Conservation International, we're really trying to look for and highlight and be a part of scaling. So I'm just very grateful to be part of this. What I'll talk about this afternoon in our session is with government of Indonesia, how we're thinking about scaling those projects from a fisheries point of view. Because marine protected areas, they are a key part of building sustainable fisheries. They produce fish in many ways. You protect the ocean and it produces fish. Historically, those fish have been caught and exported, and the value goes elsewhere. The value goes to the global north. It builds wealth. It builds wealth for other people that really don't need it. So can we create systems to close the loop locally so that the fish created, and the value stays on shore, stays with the communities that need it most, and those communities can then build wealth. To do that takes real effort. It takes effort around science to protect the right areas. For Balipara rewilding, it's more about replanting forests and regrowing these forests, starting with trees in the right areas, so that it creates these value systems and these virtuous cycles from where it was just degradation before. So that's been a huge learning for me, is this link between protection and production is just critical. And that's really why I'm sitting here.
That was very much to the point, succinct, and I really liked your point about Indonesia, about this sustainable fishing, and as I had shown you the tortoise. So it was very nice what you have said over here. What I would like to further add here, that when we had COVID and we were all under lockdown, at least in the first year, we could see a renewal happen in the whole world. The air pollution dropped because there was less of traffic and smoke being emitted out of all the vehicles that are on the streets of the world, and the birds came back, the trees grew, and all around the area that I live on, there were hundreds and thousands of birds that are always chirping throughout the day. Even they have not gone away. Another thing that I would like to point out here now, that what we are living through in this Dhaka city, I know people in Delhi suffer quite a lot from smog and pollution, and sometimes have to close down schools and so on. But in Dhaka, also the air quality is very bad, as you all know. But one thing that is now added to it is the traffic jam. So not so bad. Okay, there were traffic jams. Now the sound pollution from everybody honking continuously for no reason. And around my house, which was a very quiet area, now from 9 till about 9 in the morning till the evening, there's always a jam, and there's always people honking for no reason. So you cannot work, you cannot do an online class or do an online seminar, nothing, because the sound is coming out from everywhere around your house. And all over. So I think there should be a movement on reducing noise pollution. At least that we can do. If you cannot reduce, air pollution, this is achievable. That's one of my thoughts. I'll now move on to Bangladesh. So we have Professor Mizan Khan, who is the Deputy Director of International Center for Climate Change and Development. So having heard these two eminent gentlemen and the little points that I showed there, what is it that your organization does? If you could kindly enlighten us. Thank you.
If you allow me, Professor, I enjoy standing while I talk. Thank you. I will refer to. Thank you very much for inviting me, Balipara Foundation. I will refer to some of the thoughts that already have been raised. Ecological economics, you have shown. I myself had been a MacArthur Foundation Fellow in ecological economics back in 1994-95 at the School of Public Policy, University of Maryland, College Park. So those are the ideas very close to me. I will refer to the two teachings from Adam Smith. You have mentioned about classical economics, further modern economics, which had a normative content. So you all know, I believe, that economics evolved from moral philosophy during the second part of the 18th century. And Adam Smith himself was a moral philosopher. I will refer two teachings from his two books, classical, but refer to the first one. In 1776, he wrote the seminal work, Wealth of the Nations, and Professor Dasgupta has mentioned that the definition of wealth has changed over time. But I refer to his first book, written in 1759, on moral sentiments, theory of moral sentiments. Okay, so from there, I want to share two lessons from Adam Smith. One is that if invisible hands to work as the cybernetic corrective mechanism in the society, then economic agents must behave morally. And that is what, Mr. Anish, you have referred to as the basic assumption that classical economics had a normative content. But globally and nationally, economic agents are not behaving morally. If that would have been the case, then we could have long had the solution of climate change. I myself am a climate finance negotiator for the last 21 years with the Bangladesh delegation. So I'm not optimistic at all of having international support that much. My second lesson that I draw from Adam Smith is the first chapter on the theory of moral sentiments is titled On Sympathy. There he referred to about the indivisibility of interests. This is both at national and personal levels. Back about almost 250 years ago, he foresaw this, that if you want to pursue your personal, your national interests, you have to take care of others' interests. Otherwise, you cannot do that. Now, with the evolution of time, and we are facing kind of an environmental crisis, ecological crisis, biodiversity crisis, so we have to bring in the third agent of interest, the interest of the non-human life. Because non-human life does not need us, our existence, humans. We need their existence for our survival. So here, the interests of this third agent, non-human life's interests, need to be considered. And with this, let me share, for example, some other thoughts. And then what has happened? Classical economics started with this normative content, normative approach, and also the pricing, for example. Dr. Shamshan has referred to values versus pricing. This is very important. Under classical economics, pricing was fixed based on the cost of inputs plus some profit margin. But then neoclassical economics got totally divorced of it, and then pricing, they started defining based on the subjective utility, subjective preference, not having any relationship with the cost of input or which originated from nature. So we started having kind of a deconstruction of the relationship between nature and economy. Now we need to reconstruct what has been deconstructed for the last 150 years. And I'm absolutely sure, Professor Partha Dasgupta, on the economic rationality, if we argue for arguing for the biodiversity economy and bringing it to the market, we will not solve the problem because ethical, moral values, because climate change is not, we are not having any solution. There is a huge disconnect between climate science and climate policy. So what we need is to have more moral and ethics-based education. If we only harp on economic rationality, we will not reach the solution because we have a huge expertise now, for example, for the last 150 years, or even after climate change, we have growing kind of quality of skills and knowledge. But knowledge and skills don't match with our human behavior. That is why my argument is that if we want to bridge this huge disconnect between climate science, biodiversity science, and society and economics, then we need to have more moral and ethical education at the tertiary level, at all levels, and also at the private sector, at the company level. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Mizan. You are absolutely wonderful, and the way you have explained classical economics, neoclassical economics, and I really like that, and especially the words you use, the choice of words, deconstruction that we have between nature and economics. Now is the time for reconstruction. And so that is why we have the seminar here today. And also the point that I had touched in my little presentation, the ethics-based education and morality, that you reinforce those words, I really appreciate that. Before I come back to these three eminent gentlemen, I think I'll give some time, if you are interested, for question and answers. Ambassador Karim had mentioned to me last night that if somebody wants to ask questions to any one of us over here, you're most welcome to ask. If you may make the questions now, please say your name and where you are from, and raise your hands. And I would request the people helping to have a hand mic ready to give to the gentleman or lady who will be asking the question. Please have a hand mic. So any questions from anybody, or anybody wants to supplement anything that has been said with their own bright ideas or knowledge or experience? Okay, but we were running behind schedule, I know. We have the British High Commissioner waiting for starting his session, and along with him there are other eminent people. What I will do is, before that also, I'd like to just briefly introduce my friend who's come from Washington, D.C., Professor Dr. Faizul Islam. So he's my childhood friend. He's visiting Bangladesh after 13 years. So he's also a professor of economics at Maryland University, and he also works for the Department of Homeland Security. So when he heard I was coming here, he wanted to come along to meet all of you. So thank you for being here.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me. This is the first time I'm attending a session or something at a private university. I'm very thrilled looking at the physical infrastructure and what is being discussed here. So I'll return home or United States with a very high opinion about these private universities and the depth of the discussions and knowledge that is being disseminated. Thank you very much, Anis.
Thank you, Faisal. So I come back to the gentleman of Mr. Chanakya. Anything that you would like to say, the closing words?
So I think what you just mentioned with regard to the noise pollution and the traffic jams, I was remembering the Delhi roads, early 2000, and what helped us overcome that. And I've been talking to some of the colleagues in Bangladesh since yesterday. I've come, and they keep telling me about the plans that the government has on flyovers and stuff. So I think important thing is not only infrastructure, which is obviously the response which any state or any government will give, but I think more important is shared economy. And I think that's where, if we are able to bring in the mindset of people on shared economy, it means that if I have to come from the hotel to this venue, do I need to go in a separate car, or three of us can be in one car, right? And then usage of public transport. But before we get into the usage of public transport, we need to set up that infrastructure for public transport. And I think the traffic snarls and the noise pollutions will obviously go down if those things start happening. More importantly, shared economy. I think the new generation, that is our children's generation, is very much attuned to shared economy. They don't want to own. They would prefer to just have something which they can use and kind of move forward. They don't like, in the first session, someone was talking about why have 3 houses or 4 houses, why not have lesser number of houses, and so on and so forth. I think there's another piece, at least from the steel sector, I can tell you, which works very well which has worked and is still working very well to reduce the consumption and reduce the emissions, because carbon dioxide emission is a big challenge in steel industry. So we've been looking at newer technology, also investing in technology to bring in, so that before we reach a stage where we will not use coal, we'll not use iron ore. Okay. Can we use intermittent technologies by virtue of which instead of a three-step process, you go down two or one-step process? For example, currently in a blast furnace kind of a technology, you will get coal, then you will convert that into coke, then it goes into the blast furnace. Now, there are some technologies which we are at pilot stage. Hysarna is one, where it is possibly feasible to take straight coal into the blast furnace. That means the coke making will go out totally. If that happens, the carbon dioxide emission will reduce by at least 1 ton per ton of crude steel. So I think technology surely plays a very, very strong role and a disruptor role. And I think we should all look at that before at least we moving into some kind of a world which is very different. The last point I want to mention is that as an organization, we have been mapping all the work that we do. It's not only within the company, it's also about with the community, and trying to map all that work with the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, and seeing what is the difference we are making on an overall piece. And happy to share that we are moving in the right direction. And I think every organization would or should do that, so that they know exactly the whole footprint is moving in the right direction or not. Thank you so much.
So I like the point about shared economy, and of course, the world has to share its resources because some countries have less, some have more. And I envision a day that one day this subcontinent will be something like the European Economic Community, and you can travel freely and transport things freely amongst ourselves with morality and ethical standards. That's going to be very important. Because we're running out of time, very quickly, 2 minutes, please, Mr. Robert Gio.
Thank you. So I think one of the things that has become clear, that is made even more clear in this forum, is that nature is critical to economies. Yeah, we know this, and we know that we need billions of dollars to come into these places like Bangladesh, like India, Southeast Asia, South Asia, in order to be successful. The science has said nature is at least 30% of the solution to climate change, but only receives something like 2 or 3% of the financing. That's a huge problem. We also know, a recent study by Conservation International and Dr. Johan Rockström of the Potsdam Institute, that nature is not just an option, that even if we completely decarbonize shipping and transportation and energy and fossil fuel use, we won't stay under 1.5 degrees Celsius unless we go from nature emitting 12 gigatons to being a net sink for carbon. So land use, emissions from land use are still a huge problem. We have to solve that. And we need billions of dollars to solve that, but it's not happening. So one of the things we need to do is de-risk and figure out how to, change the thinking about risk and investment in nature, especially in these communities. And that's something that we can all pull together and think about, that we need bankers to help us do this, because the whole way we think about risk is just wrong. So we have these meltdowns like, the FTX and crypto, and somehow these institutional investors, Goldman Sachs, and government of Singapore, Temasek, these very conservative investors have convinced themselves that was a good risk to take, but obviously it wasn't. And somehow they think, well, investing in nature, how do we return from that? How do we, it's like too risky. We need to really change the thinking about risk and de-risk the ability to bring real capital markets to bear on these solutions. And that's something that I'm very excited about being a part of that conversation.
Thank you, Mr. Richard Gio. Absolutely wonderful suggestions. I hope that this are being recorded. And again, because there's no time, otherwise I would really like you to elaborate more and we could have another discussion. We don't have the time for it, but wonderful points you made. Professor Mizan, closing remarks, please.
Thank you. As for the last 2 decades, my main cup of tea is about climate change, economics, and politics. You have referred about the reduction of consumption. How can we reduce consumption if we don't have the value-based education? I define climate change for the industrial richer citizens as lifestyle threatening, and for the poor citizens, life threatening. So if the lifestyles are a little compromised through reducing material intensive consumption and increasing aesthetics based consumption, then we can have easy solution to climate change. But that is not happening because our young generation, older generation, we didn't have very good value-based education because of American model. I was a student of in America, also in Moscow. I didn't like either of the systems, you know. So we need to change the, not the, increase the volume of education, but we need to change the content of education, what the students are being taught. So we otherwise, because this growing disconnect between science and policy will continue and continue. And IPCC, I myself have been a lead author, serves as kind of a medical board. Every month, every day, they come out with some final diagnostics, but the patient does not change. The addiction does not, stop fossil fuel consumption. So please, as a university professor, I argue that development partners also, I have request, please fund to change the content of the education. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Nizam, for those points. Again, I like the point on your content of curriculum. And I'm very fortunate that the two institutions that I teach at, IUB and IBA Dhaka University, Banking and Finance, I have been given free rein to design my own content. And given my 40 years of experience in banking in the field, so I fashion it for the people who will hit the market, job market, or do their own business. And I tell them, this is important for you, this is what you will need, so study this more. These parts you don't know in this country. But of course, if you go outside the country, that's a different matter. So I take I really admire your point about concept, but I think it's an uphill task to get the University Grants Commission to allow that. But meanwhile, we are getting the liberty and we are making changes. In conclusion, I would like to thank these three most eminent gentlemen, Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary, Mr. Richard Geo, Professor Mizanar Khan, for your erudite comments, adding so much value to the discussions. I wish we had more time. And to this very eminent audience, thank you very much for being so wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anis A. Khan, Mr. Chanakya Chaudhary, Dr. Richard Geo, and Professor Mizan R. Khan to spend some quality time and share your knowledge and valuable experiences with all of us. And now I'd like to invite our esteemed dignitaries, honorable guests, and respected faculty members to a refreshment break outside of the auditorium. We're going to have a 10-minute break and we'll be here within 10 minutes for the next panel discussion. Thank you.